Hi, I'm Jake, 28, and last summer my parents tried turning me into my sister's free, full-time nanny. When I said no, they threatened to triple my rent. So I moved out. And that's the moment they accidentally destroyed their own financial stability and turned their rental property into a money-bleeding nightmare. But let me back up. I'd been living in the condo my parents owned since graduating college. 2 bedrooms, decent neighborhood, nothing fancy but comfortable. They bought it as an investment property and rented it to me for $800 a month, a huge discount for a place easily worth $1,800 to $2,000. For 4 years, I never missed a payment. I fixed minor issues myself. I didn't call them at 2 a.m. because a light bulb flickered. I was the dream tenant. My sister Bailey? Bailey was the dream parasite. 5 years younger than me, lifelong professional excuse generator, and somehow still my parents' golden child. When I got grounded for coming home 15 minutes late after helping someone with a flat tire, Bailey got rewarded with a newer, safer car for crashing moms into a mailbox while texting. She dropped out of college after 1 semester because she didn't vibe with the academic energy. My parents paid off her student loans and told her to focus on herself. Meanwhile, I had to deliver a PowerPoint presentation on why I needed $200 for textbooks. So when Bailey got pregnant with her boyfriend Danny, a man whose career ambition was, "I might start a contracting business someday, bro," my parents went into full grandparent mania. Baby furniture, maternity clothes, emergency cash, random Target hauls, constant babysitting. They built this nursery that looked like Pinterest, and Pottery Barn had a baby together. Then Sophie was born. And Bailey immediately decided childcare was optional for her. She treated my parents like they were a subscription service she had been generously granted free access to. And they loved it, until they didn't. Because after 4 months, they finally burned out. Which is exactly when they looked at me, the responsible one, and thought, "Ah, yes! A fresh pair of hands to exploit." It was a Sunday night in July when they called me into Dad's home office, also known as the room of serious conversations and unfair decisions. Mom looked tense. Dad looked rehearsed. Bailey looked like she was about to be handed a trophy. And they pitched it. "Jake," Dad said, putting on his authoritative tone, "it's time to update your rent situation." My stomach dropped. They smiled like they were offering me a business opportunity instead of preparing to mug me emotionally. "Bailey really needs reliable child care," Mom added. "And since you work from home Tuesdays and Thursdays..." I didn't even let her finish. "You want me to babysit Sophie 2 full workdays every week?" Dad nodded like this was a totally normal, rational family idea. "Right. And in exchange," he added, "we'll keep your rent at $800 instead of increasing it to the new market rate." "And what's that?" I asked. Dad didn't blink. $200. I actually laughed. Out loud. It echoed against the office walls. They weren't offering an exchange. They were threatening me. Be Bailey's nanny, or get priced out of my home. My parents, had turned into petty landlords running an emotional protection racket. And they sincerely expected me to say yes. They really didn't know me at all. I stood there in my dad's cramped office, staring at 3 people who genuinely thought they were being reasonable. My mom leaned in first, wearing her patented concerned parent face. "Jake, honey, think about how much you're saving. You'd still have discounted rent. And Bailey really needs help right now." Bailey didn't look at me. Of course she didn't. Looking at someone makes manipulation harder. She just shrugged and said, "Sophie's honestly super easy. She naps a ton. You won't even notice she's there." Which was hilarious, considering Sophie cried at every family dinner like she was auditioning for a siren shipwrecking sailors. I took a deep breath and said, "I can't watch a baby while I'm working." Dad waved his hand like he was dismissing a waiter. "You work from home. You're just on your computer." "Dad," I said slowly, I'm on video calls 4 to 6 hours a day with contractors, architects, and city inspectors. I cannot have a baby screaming in the background. Bailey rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being employed. They exchanged a look, that merry telepathy look, and I knew they were about to escalate. Dad cleared his throat. Well, he said, either way, your rent will be adjusted to $2,200 on August 1st. Unless you agree to help with Sophie. Consider it an alternative arrangement. Ah, yes. An alternative arrangement. A phrase famously used right before someone gets coerced, blackmailed, or shoved into a trunk. I wasn't even angry yet. I was too shocked. You're threatening to triple my rent, I said, to force me into free childcare. Mom gasped. Jake. We would never. That's literally what you're doing. Dad jumped in with his CEO voice. This is business, not coercion. You're my parents, I snapped. Not my landlords. You don't get to use my housing as leverage to force me into raising Bailey's kid. Bailey suddenly pretended she was the victim. Family helps family. She sniffed. If you cared about Sophie at all. I cut her off. If you cared about Sophie, you'd arrange real childcare instead of dumping her on whoever you can guilt-trip the fastest. That's when Dad stood, signaling the ultimatum was final. You have 1 week to decide. Help your sister, or pay $2,200. I looked him dead in the eyes. No. You haven't thought it through, he said. No, I repeated. I'm not giving you a week. My answer is no right now. Mom's face collapsed. Jake, please. I'll start packing tonight, I said. Send me the paperwork for the new rent. I'll be out by the 31st. Bailey froze like someone had unplugged her. You're moving out? Over this? No, I said. I'm moving out because this isn't a family. This is an ultimatum. I walked out of the room. Nobody followed. And on the drive home, the shock wore off, replaced by anger. Cold, clean, steady anger. They thought I needed them so much that I'd fold. They thought holding my rent hostage would make me obedient. They thought I'd sacrifice my career for Bailey's convenience. They really underestimated me. Because by the end of that week, I was already signing a lease somewhere else. Apartment hunting at the speed of anger should count as an Olympic sport. For 3 days straight, I toured every halfway decent rental within a 30-minute radius. Most were either too expensive, too small, smelled like someone microwaved sadness, or came with a landlord who said things like, "We're a family here," which is a red flag the size of Texas. But on day 4, I found it, a clean, recently renovated 1-bedroom, 20 minutes farther from work but well within my budget. $1,400 a month. No strings. No ultimatums. No sister. No baby. No parents lurking like emotionally manipulative raccoons. I applied. Passed the background check. Signed the lease. Done. I was free. At least, logistically. Emotionally? My phone was exploding. Dad's voicemail. Son, don't be rash. Let's talk like adults. Mom's voicemail. Jake, please call us back. We need to figure out the August rent. Bailey's text. I just can't believe you do this to me. Sophie needs family. I guess work means more to you than she does. Yeah. My job means more to me than being blackmailed. Shocking. I ignored everything and started packing. On day 5, I finally called my parents back. I figured they deserved to hear it from me directly before I dropped the keys at their door like a disappointed Airbnb guest. Dad answered on the first ring. Well? Have you thought it over? Yes, I said. I'm moving out. Already signed a lease. Silence. Not shocked silence. Offended silence. You're moving out, he repeated, like he couldn't physically process the words. Correct. Mom grabbed the phone. Jake, please don't do this. We can work something out. Maybe just 1 day a week? Half days? We're flexible. You weren't flexible, I said. You gave me an ultimatum. That wasn't an ultimatum, she insisted, the way people insist water isn't wet. It absolutely was. And I'm not agreeing to it. Dad jumped back in. Fine. How about $1,200? A compromise. And 6 months from now, when Bailey needs more help? I said. What then? Another rent hike? Another family discussion in your office? He didn't answer. Because he knew damn well I was right. I said, I'll be out by the 31st. Mom's voice cracked. You're abandoning your family. No, I said. I'm refusing to be extorted by my family. Then I hung up. And for the first time in years I felt something I hadn't felt in that condo for a long time. Control. Move-out day came fast. My buddy Kevin showed up with a rented truck, 3 liters of iced coffee, and enough enthusiasm to move a small nation. We loaded my furniture in the July heat, sweating like 2 raccoons trapped in a sauna. By sunset, everything I owned was in my new apartment, smaller, yes, but clean, peaceful, and actually mine. As we sat on the floor eating takeout, Kevin said, Dude, this is the healthiest thing you've ever done. And for once, I agreed. Because for the first time ever, I wasn't living under my parents' version of help. I wasn't a convenience. I wasn't leverage. I wasn't Bailey's backup plan. I was free. But the fallout? That was only beginning. Fallout began before I even finished unpacking my first box. My parents went from outraged to panicked at the exact moment they realized something crucial. They had no tenant. Which meant they had no rent. Which meant they had a mortgage due in 3 weeks and nobody to cover it. Their brilliant, triple his rent to bully him into childcare plan suddenly looked a lot less like strategy, and a lot more like self-inflicted financial arson. By August 1st, I dropped my keys in their mailbox like a resignation letter. Dad opened the door, looked at the keys in his hand like they were radioactive, and said, You really did it. I really did. Your mother is devastated. No, I said. She's disappointed her manipulation didn't work. He flinched. Actually flinched. You're being immature. No, I said. I'm being independent. I walked away. He stayed standing there holding 2 little keys that represented all the leverage he used to think he had. Then the condo sat empty. August, no renters. September, no renters. October, still no renters. They listed it at $2,200, like geniuses. The exact number they used to threaten me. But no one wants to pay luxury prices for a condo with a kitchen last updated during the Clinton administration. In November, I heard through my aunt that they dropped the price to $1,900. Still no bites. December, $1,600. Still nothing. January, they finally got a tenant for $1,550. A full $650 less than the market rate they claimed it was worth, and $750 more than I was paying them reliably for 4 straight years. Here's the math they didn't do. I paid them $800 x 12 months x 4 years equals $38,400 in dependable rent. Then they lost 8 months of rent entirely, roughly $12,800, while scrambling to cover the mortgage. All because they wanted me to provide $960 to $1,280 per month of free childcare to Bailey. Congratulations, parents. You played yourselves. Meanwhile, in my quiet 1-bedroom apartment, I was thriving. Work was going great. No baby screams on Zoom calls. No guilt trips. No financial blackmail. Just peace. My parents drifted into this weird Cold War mode. Dad sent occasional, stiff texts like, We should talk soon. Mom sent the emotional guilt trip versions. You've changed. You're shutting us out. Family matters more than money. Funny how family suddenly matters when your mortgage is due. Bailey jumped onto social media and posted a vague, family betrayal quote over a picture of Sophie, which made her look like she was announcing a political scandal instead of losing free babysitting. I blocked her. Then February rolled in. My aunt invited herself over, sat on my couch, and said, "Your parents are drowning with that condo." I shrugged. "That's not my problem." She nodded slowly. "It isn't. And you made the right choice." Then she leaned forward. "But your sister, she's actually growing up." That got my attention. Apparently Bailey and Danny both had full-time jobs now. Bailey had Sophie in subsidized daycare, not Instagrammable but functional. And for once, she was actually, shockingly, taking responsibility. My aunt said, "She's maturing." I almost asked, "Which Bailey?" But I kept it inside. Still, I didn't reach out. Until Bailey texted me months later asking to talk. And by now, I had enough distance, and enough curiosity, to say yes. We met in a coffee shop. Bailey sat down, looked nervous, and before I could even sip my drink she said, "I'm sorry." I blinked. Bailey apologizing was like a solar eclipse, rare, slightly terrifying, and requiring eye protection. "For what?" I asked. "For everything," she said. "For expecting you to fix my life. For letting Mom and Dad pressure you. For going along with the rent thing. It was wrong." She fiddled with her coffee cup. And I finally realized how unfair it was. That was the first time in years I saw her as something other than a walking disaster with parental backing. She continued, "I told Mom and Dad they were wrong, too. They still don't see it. They're convinced you overreacted." "I didn't overreact," I said. "I know," she said. "And I get it now. Really." Then she added, "You're welcome to see Sophie anytime. No pressure. No strings." It wasn't a reconciliation. Not a movie moment. Not a sudden tight sibling bond. It was just honest. And for once, that was enough. My parents? Still no apology. Just occasional texts pretending the past never happened. But the truth is simple. They gambled our relationship for free childcare. They lost the gamble. And they're still paying for it, financially and emotionally. Meanwhile, I'm in a smaller apartment with slightly higher rent, but infinitely lower stress. Freedom costs money. Peace costs boundaries. And moving out? By spring, my life had stabilized into something I wasn't used to, peaceful adulthood without parental interference. But my parents? They were entering their flop era in slow motion. Their texts shifted from guilt to confusion, to denial, to desperation light. "Dad, we'd like to talk about rebuilding the relationship." "Mom, can you please call back? Your father is stressed." Translation: "Please save us from the mortgage we set on fire ourselves." I ignored them. Not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. But then Bailey texted. Not vague. Not manipulative. Not dramatic. Just, "Jake, can we talk?" "Please." I hesitated for 2 hours. Kevin said, "Bro, this smells like bait." And he was probably right. But curiosity won, so I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. Public. Where she couldn't ambush me with a baby or an invoice for emotional labor. Bailey walked in looking older. Not physically, emotionally. Like life had finally slapped her across the face hard enough to wake her up. She sat, wrapped both hands around her cup, and said, "I owe you an apology." I didn't react. Could have been a trap. But then she kept going, the longest, most shockingly self-aware speech Bailey had ever delivered in her life. "I was wrong. Mom and Dad were wrong. You shouldn't have been dragged into my mess. I expected you to fix things for me like they always did. And when you didn't, I treated you like the villain in my own story." She actually looked up and met my eyes. "And you weren't. You were the only sane one." That hit me harder than expected. Then she said something I'd waited 28 years to hear. I'm not a kid anymore. I have to stop acting like one. She talked about real stuff. Working full-time. Putting Sophie in subsidized daycare. Danny, somehow, growing up enough to hold a stable job. Them budgeting. Them struggling. Them surviving. And for the first time, they were doing it without dumping everything on my parents. I asked, why apologize to me now? She hesitated. Because I learned something this year. Help doesn't mean give me everything I want. It means take responsibility for your own life first. Then she added quietly, and because losing you scared me more than losing the convenience. That one landed. We talked for an hour. No fights, no manipulation, no pressure. Just two adults figuring out how to exist without the old roles. As we stood to leave, Bailey said, if you ever want to see Sophie, I'd like that. Not as childcare. Just as family. It felt genuine. For once. I nodded. Maybe sometime. Not a promise. Not a boundary break. Just a door I wasn't ready to close completely. But my parents? They had learned absolutely nothing. Because the next message I got from Mom was, now that Bailey apologized, can we go back to normal? No apology. No acknowledgement. No accountability. Just the expectation that their version of normal, which happened to include emotional coercion and rent-based blackmail, was waiting for me like a paused TV show. Spoiler, it wasn't. And what happened when I refused? That was the final straw. Mom's text, the "Can we go back to normal?" one, simmered in my notifications like spoiled milk. Normal? Normal was them treating Bailey like a fragile Victorian princess, and me like an appliance that dispensed responsibility on demand. Normal was guilt. Normal was pressure. Normal was me carrying the weight so Bailey could float. Absolutely not. So I didn't answer. 3 days later, Dad texted, we need to talk about the condo. Ah, yes. The emotional support mortgage. I replied. There's nothing to talk about. He called within 30 seconds. He didn't even say hello. Jake, this situation with the condo has gotten complicated. Complicated how? We've had some maintenance issues. And the tenants are difficult. Translation. Your mother and I forgot what being actual landlords is like because you handled everything for years. He continued, they call about every little thing. They want repairs immediately. They're picky. Unrealistic. You listed it as a premium rental. I said. For premium rent. Silence. Then. You were a much easier tenant. No kidding. Dad inhaled sharply. We miss having someone responsible in there. That someone left. I said. Because you tried to manipulate him. He ignored that completely. We lowered the rent again. But with the carryover losses from last year, your mother and I are stretched thin. There it was. The real reason for the call. Not reconciliation. Not reflection. Financial panic. I let the silence drag until he finally said, is there any chance you'd consider moving back? We can return your rent to $800. I had to sit down because I nearly choked laughing. You're offering me the same rent you used as leverage to force me into free childcare? That was a misunderstanding. He insisted. No, I said. That was coercion. We were under stress, he said. And I was under manipulation. His voice tightened. Jake, be reasonable. That did it. Reasonable? I asked. You threatened to triple my rent. You tried to trap me into raising Bailey's kid. You didn't apologize. You didn't even reflect. You just want the benefit back. That's not fair. It's completely fair. I said. You lost a reliable tenant. You lost 8 months of rent. You lost my trust. And none of that was an accident. You made choices. You deal with them. He started to say something, but I cut him off. I'm not coming back. Ever. Not while you two pretend nothing happened. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't insult him. I simply told the truth. And that hurt him more than anything else could have. He exhaled, defeated. I hope you don't mean that. I do, I said. But I also hope you figure things out. Then. And Dad, you don't get to hold a relationship hostage and then act shocked when the hostage escapes. I hung up. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family fixer. And the world didn't end. 3 weeks later, my aunt came over again. She sat down and said, You know your parents told the family you abandoned them, right? That tracks, I said. Well, nobody's buying it, she added with a smirk. Everyone knows what actually happened. And your dad is quietly telling people they might be selling the condo. I blinked. They're selling it? Mortgage stress, she said. They overplayed their hand. They're embarrassed. They're trying to act like it's strategic. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. But I won't lie, there was a certain poetic justice to it. They gambled the condo. They gambled me. They lost both. Bailey and I kept texting occasionally, small things, normal things. Photos of Sophie drawing on the wall with a crayon. Updates about daycare. Little human moments. No guilt. No pressure. No hidden agenda. We weren't close. But we were good. And that was surprisingly enough. As for my parents? We haven't spoken since that last call. Maybe one day they'll apologize. Maybe they won't. But I stopped waiting for them to be better people. Instead, I became a better version of myself, one who chooses peace over obligation, and boundaries over bargains. My apartment is still smaller than the condo. Still farther from work. Still has those annoying creaky pipes that sound like ghosts doing yoga at midnight. But it's mine. And there's no price tag high enough for the peace of knowing that no one owns access to your life. Not even family. Especially not family. The truth? Moving out didn't just save me. It rebuilt me. And if my parents ever learn from it, great. If they don't, that's their mortgage to carry, not mine.